Well, let's speak to Jake Wallis Simons, author of Israelophobia, the newest version of the oldest hatred, and what to do about it. Jake, good to have you on the programme. There are people saying that this has been rather rambunctious of Israel yet again, a big gamble perhaps. Lord knows how Iran's going to respond. However, people I speak to who are sort of close observers of geopolitics sort of say to me, well, actually, if not now, then when? Israel was extremely worried about the proliferation of uranium in Iran and the time frame that Tehran needed in order to construct nuclear weapons, putting it down perhaps as in 15 nuclear bombs within days. Meanwhile, we know that Donald Trump was going to go and try and have negotiations with Iran. People thought that perhaps the reason for Iran coming to the table was to buy time, to protract those negotiations while it continued to furiously enrich uranium. Do you think that that is true, that Israel has actually taken an opportunity when it could, and it was very much a preemptive strike in self-defense?
Well, this has been a problem that's been around not just for the past couple of years, but for the past few decades. Israel has been exceedingly patient, as anybody observing events will confirm, for decades after decade, while the Iranian regime has not just been pursuing overtly and covertly nuclear weapons, but it's also been vowing openly to destroy Israel. In Palestine Square in central Tehran, there is a clock counting down to September the 9th, 2040, which was when the Ayatollah prophesied that Israel would meet its end, would be destroyed by Iran. These are fanatics. They have a theology by which they are aiming to get the apocalypse underway, starting with an attack on Israel, so that a mythical figure called the Mahdi will emerge from invisibility and lead the faithful to Islamic victory over the world. That's what they're aiming for with nuclear weapons, with ballistic missiles, and also with overseas militia. That's what we're dealing with. That's what Israel has been dealing with as being first in the firing line. Israel sat back, has not attacked the nuclear program, has let it get to this point where 15 nuclear bombs could be produced within a matter of months or even weeks, and has finally been forced to take action.
Is it going to be enough, though? It's got to be a fairly comprehensively executed strategy if it's going to prevent Iran from accelerating its desire to have nuclear weapons. One might think that this would be, well, beyond provocative if you're targeting a hostile state. I personally agree with the approach that Israel's taking. I don't understand why the West is so lily-livered about helping it. But given how fanatical Iran are, given that they don't really care about stuff like civilian casualties, given that they are quite bloodthirsty and gung-ho, how do we know for certain that they don't have any sort of capabilities to retaliate, and retaliate in a dangerously decisive way?
Well, one of the things about Iran is that the majority of the Iranian people loathe the regime and support Israel. It's a minority regime of fanatics that exerts its power across the country with brutal and sadistic methods. So that means that it's a very easy country for Israel to penetrate in terms of intelligence operations. The Mossad has had huge and spectacular successes in Iran over the last few decades, and those have only been more and more impressive as time has gone on. So I think that Israel knows everything about Iran that it needs to know. It was able to totally disable its air defense systems, its strategic air defense systems, last October in a succession of pinpoint strikes. And in fact, these current attacks that we've seen over the last 24 hours were not just carried out by hundreds of airstrikes. They were also carried out by Mossad teams on the ground, conducting close-range operations with precision missiles fired from vehicles, fired from the land, and also fired from quadcopters, which carry a high degree of explosives operating on a short distance, and the team that launches them melts away, causes maximum damage with minimal implications. So Israel has completely penetrated the Iranian regime. It knows exactly what it's dealing with. Iran launched 100 drones in the last few hours. All of them have been shot down already by Israel and its allies, including the Saudis, but not including, shamefully, Britain. Israel knows what to expect. We're going to have a tense few days ahead, but Israel, the IDF has recently said in the last hour or so that everything's under control.
Yeah, might the British thinking here be the idea that, as the IDF was saying, everything is under control, that they are well equipped to defend themselves and Iran is militarily weakened, and that actually, for domestic reasons, to try and prevent reprisals perhaps on our own streets, that the UK government have decided it might be more pragmatic to openly state it will not be coming to Israel's aid?
Well, I think there's only one reason why Britain has not said it will come to Israel's aid, and that is cowardice, sheer cowardice. We saw Britain help Israel before when it was under attack by the Iranians last year, but it's not doing so again out of cowardice. The Prime Minister and David Lammy have both gone on the record extensively in recent months talking about the grave threat that Iran poses, not just to Israel, but to the West as well. We've seen terror attacks foiled on our soil, kidnap plots foiled on our soil. I personally have spoken to high-ranking British security officials who said that Iran, above all, is the threat that keeps them awake at night. We know what that threat is, and yet we're not getting involved because of the overwhelming hostility towards Israel that's only been growing in the British establishment, despite the fact that Israel is on the front line against fanatical jihadism that is coming for us too. Israel is doing us all a favour by fighting these guys so that we don't have to. The least we could do is throw our support behind the Jewish state.
We know that America is now going to do that in terms of trying to intercept the retaliatory measures from Iran. However, Donald Trump has stressed that America was not notified of this particular operation. That's the official line anyway. But he has now put on Truth Social, knowing that in theory there's supposed to be further discussions with Iran. Those talks, I believe, are all but dead in the water now about a nuclear deal. But he has put on his Truth Social platform, "I gave Iran chance after chance to make a deal. I told them in the strongest words to just do it. But no matter how hard they tried, no matter how close they got, they just couldn't get it done. I told them it would be much worse than anything they know, anticipated, or were told, that the United States makes the best and most lethal military equipment anywhere in the world, by far, and that Israel has a lot of it, with much more to come, and they know how to use it. Certain Iranian hardliners spoke bravely, but they didn't know what was about to happen. They're all dead now, and it will only get worse. There has already been great death and destruction, but there is still time to make this slaughter, with the next already planned attacks being even more brutal, come to an end. Iran must make a deal before there's nothing left and save what was once known as the Iranian Empire. No more death, no more destruction, and in typical Donald Trump capitalization, just do it before it is too late. God bless you all," he ends. I mean, tough talk there from the American president. He might not have, he might claim to have not been strategically notified as to what Israel was planning in this particular operation, but he seems to be hinting to, or not just hinting, but stating quite brazenly to Iran that he knows that Israel is going to carry on and that Iran's got to come to the table or got to do something, because Israel has no intention of holding back.
Well, it's quite obvious that the Americans knew what was going to happen, because yesterday they evacuated non-essential personnel from their embassies throughout the Middle East in anticipation of this attack. So they knew what was going on. We've seen the Israel's skies defended by the Saudis, by the Americans and other allies. They obviously were prepared. They knew what was going to happen. This sort of operation was conducted by thousands of Israeli military personnel, intelligence, air force and others. None of this leaked out. In fact, Israel did some war games. The Israeli Air Force did some war games over the sea within the last 24 hours. The Iranians saw that, but in their complacency, didn't think that this time it was going to be real, it was going to happen. They thought it was just a negotiating tactic. So look, the Iranians were asleep at the wheel. Trump definitely knew what was going to happen. But at this point, it could go in a number of ways. One way in which we could see this going is that if Israel needs help in getting to the very deep underground nuclear facilities, the ones that are deepest buried, we could see the US helping with their B-2 bombers dropping the Moabs, the mother of all bombs, the biggest bunker busters on Earth, which only the Americans have. We could see them giving those to the Israelis to help out with that. We could see the Americans coming into the war if Iran does retaliate with any degree of success, which looks unlikely at the moment. But I would also say that we could see these negotiations beginning to bear fruit. It sounds absurd now that the Iranians have been humiliated and are on their back foot. But the Israelis have been arguing for some time that yes, a deal is vital with Iran to try to bring it to some degree into the international community safely, but you've got to get rid of the nuclear program first. That's got to be a non-negotiable first step towards rehabilitating Iran. So it's not necessarily the end of the road with regard to the negotiations, but right now the Iranians are humiliated, they're angry, they raised the red flag of revenge above their mosque in central Tehran, which seemed like a rather futile and pathetic move. But, you know, is there a sting in the tail? We don't know. But so far it seems like the Israelis very much have the upper hand, and the US, at the very least, has their back, even if UK doesn't.
Yeah, and it seems to me that Israel is still continuing to target various particular locations in Iran. There's been another attack against the nuclear facilities being reported by Iranian state television. This is going to go on for a number more days, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was planned initially to last between 4 days and a week. It looks like it's going according to plan so far. It isn't going to be over quickly. I mean, the one thing that I would note about the Israeli attacks is that they are more extensive than many people would have expected. They've targeted not just the nuclear program, but also the Iranian defense apparatus. In fact, they started by targeting the Iranian defense command structure, a bit like the playbook that was used against Hezbollah, taking out the command structure first and then the stockpiles of weapons. And as a measure of the deception that successfully was used against the Iranians, all of these people were killed at home. They had no idea this was coming. They'd seen Israeli war games over the sea. They'd seen people talking about what Israel could do to Iran if it wanted to in recent days, but they didn't take the hint. They stayed at home. They didn't go into bomb shelters, didn't go to the army HQs. They were all taken out in their beds. That was done first, and after that, the nuclear facilities were targeted by Israel. Obviously, the reason is because Israel wants to prevent a full-scale retaliation from Iran that might be threatening to its own citizens on its own soil. So it's very, very strategic in that way. But it's much more extensive than simply a surgical strike on the nuclear facilities. It seems like, although Israel's been open about not seeking to gain regime change in Iran, it does seem like that is not unlikely at the moment. The news that we're getting from inside Iran is great jubilation, huge celebration of Israel strikes, great support for Israel. There's a lot of love between the downtrodden Iranian people, Iranian women who can't go out onto the streets and with their hair uncovered and so forth, between them and the Israelis. Now, will they topple the regime? That's really the next big question that we're waiting to see the answer to in the region.
If they did topple the regime, who's going to essentially take over?
Well, that's an excellent question. And Khamenei, although he is a fanatic, a hardliner, a murderous, evil leader, he's not the worst that the Iranian regime has to offer. In fact, in recent months, he's been under pressure himself from hardliners within the Revolutionary Guards who've said, why are you talking to the Iranians, to the Americans about the nuclear program? We've been humiliated by the Israelis. They've destroyed Hezbollah. They've taken out our air defenses. They're winning in Gaza, and it's all your fault. Let's get more hardline. Let's get more brutal. And he's been trying to, in a way, walk this tightrope of keeping the Americans at the negotiating table while also delivering hardline rhetoric to appease his even more fanatical base, the kind of creature that he gave birth to, that he can no longer barely control. So if he were to go, it would be a bit of a toss-up as to whether even more hardline factions would take over or whether the regime would collapse completely. That it would collapse completely. There are a number of potential candidates for a new Iranian leadership, including the grandson of the former Shah of Iran, who's currently in exile in the West, but who's got a lot of support in Iran and in the diaspora. It's not impossible that this could be the beginning of the collapse of the tyrannical regime in Tehran and the beginning of something that approaches something more democratic and palatable to the West, with whom we could have peace between not just the UK and Iran, but Israel and Iran. That would be a wonderful future, that this could be the bloody beginning of a wonderful future.
Well, let's all hope that you're right and that is how things are going to play out. Jake Wallis Simons, thank you ever so much for coming on the programme. OK.